yes, cider is its own thing, but if you're a wine drinker, there's some really good reasons why you should be really excited about cider.
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
That was Eleanor Léger of Eden Specialty Ciders bringing us into this here episode 378 of Cider Chat. Eleanor is our featured guest on this here episode, and we'll be talking to her about what I like to call the inner realm of the Ice Cider Queen, partly because Eden is really renowned for their ice ciders, but there's big news that just happened this year for this 15-year-old company. That includes some brand expansion, all happening in Vermont. So a lot to be said there. She's also the current president of the board at the American Cider Association and has made a reach for herself worldwide. So it's a very, very intimate conversation that covers a lot of topics from work-life balance to brand expansion. So stay tuned for that. But in the meanwhile, we're going to roll next to some words about our sponsors, starting with the Northwest Cider Association's focus on Idaho cideries.
Endless blue skies, vast rolling landscapes, and the unmistakable silhouette of apple orchards stretching to the horizon. Welcome to Southwest Idaho, a region steeped in sunshine, fertile soil, and apple-growing heritage.
Idaho has the perfect combination of cold winters and sun-kissed summers, making it one of the prime locations for apple cultivation in the U.S. And right here, nestled among the orchards of Southwest Idaho, is a gem that cider fans won't want to miss.
Introducing Meriwether Cider, a family-owned cidery that transforms the essence of Idaho's apples into delightful, sparkling beverages. At their Boise, Idaho location, you'll find ciders that are classic apple-centric to blackberry basil and more. What sets Meriwether Cider apart isn't just their innovative flavors. It's the love, commitment, and pride they pour into each bottle. Sourced from local orchards, their apples capture the very soul of Southwest Idaho.
And, while you're here in Idaho, why not immerse yourself in a true apple-picking experience? Southwest Idaho boasts a myriad of orchards welcoming visitors.
And after a day among the trees, retire to a scenic spot. Pop open a bottle of Meriwether Cider, and let the effervescent bubbles tell you stories of this land, its people, and its apples.
If your heart yearns for open skies, the scent of blossoming apple trees, and the crisp taste of artisanal cider, Southwest Idaho and Meriwether Cider await.
Southwest Idaho, where nature's bounty meets craftsmanship. Discover more Idaho cideries by going to the Northwest Cider Association Idaho directory at nwcider.com. Cider is going up in Idaho, and there is a perfect glass awaiting you today.
Sweet, crisp, fresh, or balanced, whatever the cider you want to make, you will find the right yeast for your favorite cider in the Saf Cider range by Fermentis. This week, let's discover AB1 Saf Cider. AB1 stands for Apple Balanced. This yeast is the right choice for balanced cider. It ensures a very good assimilation of fructose and excellent for low-gravity ciders, which results in a delicate aroma profile combining fresh and elaborate fruit notes with a balanced mouthfeel respecting cider structure. Saf Cider AB1 will suit for all types of balanced ciders, even under difficult fermentation conditions. Want to explore diversity of cider profiles? Discover it through the selection of yeast strains visiting their website, fermentis.com. That's spelled fermetis.com. Cider Chat would not be able to roll out to you with all these amazing episodes if it wasn't for our sponsors. So a big thank you to both Fermentis and the Northwest Cider Association. It's also listener supported, and to tell you that that is actually the bulk of how this podcast goes out each week, is by the support of patrons. One way to do that is by hitting the donate button at ciderchat.com. And another big way to kind of get interconnected into a community of like-minded folks is to join the Cider Chat Patreon page. And at that Cider Chat Patreon page, you can set the tier for what level you would like to join. There's one specifically for folks within the commercial trade. It's called the Cider Going Up Campaign. And at ciderchat.com, there is a dedicated page listing the current folks signed up in that campaign. From east to west, we begin with Spacetime Mead and Cider Works, based in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, right by Scranton. And then going further west in Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh, in the town of Acme, you'll find Taddy Bogle Cider Works. Big projects going on there. They're building a big pavilion this summer. Definitely a place to put on your bucket list to get there and try their cider. Then going further to the west, we have in Doylestown, Ohio, Bent Ladder Cider and Wine. And in Dolores, Colorado, in the Four Corners region, Esoterra Cider Works. Out in Washington State, there's Press Then Press, which is not a cidery. They are folks that help cideries get their products to you, and they set up an amazing amount of different gift packages. Check out Press Then Press online. And now we're going to head over to Japan, where there is the one and only Insider Japan, which is Japan's only bilingual English and Japanese online magazine dedicated to cider. What Insider Japan has been doing also as an importer to that region is fantastic for helping get cider going up in that amazing country. Going further to the UK, where you'll find in London Duck Chicken Cider. That is based in a South London flat where they're making cider, and it is kick-ass. Then you have Ross Cider and Perry Company, based in Ross-on-Wye in the West Country of the UK. And the Ross Cider Fest just took place. Super jelly not to be there. It is one of those festivals that you don't want to miss in your lifetime, and try to get there frequently. Happens always this time of year. It's a music and cider fest. Oh, and to be surrounded by folks who are just digging incredible Perry's and cider, and go to the U Tree Pub right there on the property. Talk about heaven on earth. So thanks to all those fine patrons. Definitely, if you are getting something from this podcast, hit that button, the donate button at ciderchat.com, or check out the Cider Chat Patreon page today.
Walking through the orchards.
After our featured conversation, I'll be reading a letter from a patron of Cider Chat, which is always tons of fun for me because I get a lot of info about who the listeners of Cider Chat are. And I think it's also value for anybody out there in Ciderville too, because, you know, we are kind of connecting the dots here around the world. It's a big party, like everyone's welcome. And so if you're feeling like out of the loop, or, you know, wondering what's going on, it's September, and feeling like, dang, like, is there anybody out there like me? I just want you to know, yes, there is. Because the door is always open at the Cider House, welcoming you in, and there's always a perfect glass of cider for you, whether all you want is fresh pressed apple juice or some fine fermented cider. We got it. And and we should also say Perry.
Indeed, Rhea, indeed. Do not leave out the Perry, please.
I'm sorry, Perry Pear. Hey, folks out there in Ciderville, just so you know, the Talking Palms are with me in the Cider House, kind of help me behind the scenes. We've been working on some projects. I know that Cider Chat is still rolling out every other week, and we're going to be continuing that because I still have a lot more work to do, including one, which is getting a new website up for Cider Chat. And that's been a doozy of a project. So a lot is going on here. It has not been just a swimming in the lake all day type of thing all summer. Pretty busy at Cider Chat Central.
Roger that.
You got it, Mr. Quince. I think I'm going to roll next to the featured conversation with Eleanor Léger of Eden Specialty Ciders.
Hip, hip, hooray!
I know, Medlars. I love her. I know so many people out there in Ciderville love Eleanor Léger and all the different products that they're bringing. And there's some really big news that just happened. So she's going to be talking about all of that. I was recently up in Vermont earlier this summer visiting with a number of different Vermont cider makers, and that's the series that we have been rolling out here throughout this amazing summer of 2023. And of course, I wanted to speak to Eleanor. I have had her on the podcast before, but I've never had the opportunity to actually have an interview. So this was a real treat for me. It took place at the West Charleston location where Eden first started, and that is a farmhouse. She's going to talk a little bit about that. And we're sitting around the kitchen table there, chatting away. This is a super intimate conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy it as much as I did. We did the whole gamut from work-life balance to talking about the brand expansion. There's a lot here, so make sure to grab a glass and join this chat now with Eleanor Léger of so many different products in Vermont. I know. To just say of the Northeast Kingdom and beyond. Such a role model you are. I want to start off this conversation with you asking, what the heck is your job title? Like, how do you say, my job is? Then I want to ask you, how much do you drive around?
Oh, God, don't ask me that.
But do you have a job title, like, a succinct job title?
Well, my official job title is CEO of Eden Specialty Cider, Shelburne Vineyard and Iapetus wines.
So that's three. It just became three brands. Yeah. So
there's a holding company in the background. So like on all the legal documents, it's like ESV Holdings. It means nothing. It will never be a public. It's not a brand. It's just a legal entity. But
forever it's been, since 2007.
7, yeah.
Eden Specialty Ciders, based up here in the northern quadrant of Vermont. So if you're going straight up on Interstate 91, your like tasting room for Eden is in Newport.
That's right.
And then just this year, 2023, you have taken under your wing now 2 wine brands.
Yes, we started with Ice Cider. It was the fall of 2007 harvest, and I think we got our official license and became a company January 17th of 2008. So we celebrated our 15th anniversary this year, January, except we never got around to celebrating because we were in the middle of doing this merger.
Busy, okay,
And Shelburne Vineyard just celebrated its 25th anniversary.
Huge.
So both of those entities have been around for quite a while, and we've known the founders of Shelburne Vineyard since we got started, and have done events together. And in fact, for the first 6 years, you're sitting in our farmhouse where we made everything in our basement here for the first 6 years. And our tasting room is where we're sitting right now.
Wow.
Which is the kitchen and the dining area.
Wow.
And so people would call up on Sunday and say, hey, we're coming from Michigan. We'd like to come and, taste your ciders. And I'd be like, oh my God, I got to get up and clean the kitchen and get dressed. Give me half an hour.
So they'd come into your home.
And we're, as you've now discovered, we're in the middle of nowhere, a mile up a dead dirt road in the far Northeast Kingdom. So the first place you could actually walk into a tasting room, taste our ice cider, and buy a bottle was at Shelburne Vineyard's tasting room in Shelburne. Because we were friends and they were out of ice wine, and they're like, hey, we'd love to offer yours. So it's been there's been a lot of partnership along the way. And then Ken and Gail Albert, who are the founders, just wonderful people. We share a lot of the same values about the land and the people in our communities. And they're in their early 80s and needed to retire. And we just figured we could find a way to help out with that. And I think the driver from the Eden point of view was really, as you know, there's always been this sort of 2 different directions in terms of cider making in the U.S. Much as we're, one industry, and we have an the ACA is very much a big tent organization.
American Cider Association.
We have people who make cider from a beer point of view in terms of batches every 5 weeks into cans and kegs, and then folks who make cider from a wine point of view, which is press it at harvest, age it, put it in a 750 ml bottle, etc. And we've always been in the latter camp, although we have, during the pandemic, and particularly we launched cans although still made from a wine point of view.
We were talking about your roles and the branding. So way back, the tasting room for Eden was really like happening a lot at the Shelburne Vineyard.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Talk about a convergence of wine and cider. I know that's a bit of your approach to cider. Is that like slow ferment, that, really attentiveness as one would as a winemaker. Besides helping what sound like really incredible people who are 80 years young, why else would you do this? I mean, this is like a big step at this stage when, we're still coming out of pandemic. There's a lot of economic burdens. It's a huge step. So there must be something within your psyche is saying, I like cider and I like wine.
We do see that convergence and the opportunity for co-ferments, and we had done a co-ferment with them back in 2019 that I just thought was delicious, and we did a small batch can release just at the time that we announced the merger, which was Macintosh apples fermented over Riesling grape skins that they grew back last fall.
Nice.
So, there's a thing where we fermented it back in September and it got canned and released in April.
Right.
Not your 5-week turnaround.
Not your 5-week turnaround. No, that's not a beer style at all.
Yeah, and I look forward to giving you a can of that because it's delicious.
Oh, cool. So can I ask you about these co-ferments? If it was on the skins, were the skins dried?
No, we got them literally the day they were pressed.
Right over.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are definitely regulatory issues that, hit us in terms of taxes for doing co-ferments. That it would be really nice to get them fixed.
Yeah, no doubt. So we're going to be seeing more of that.
Yep, seeing more of that. And the other thing that really drove this was we have incredible synergies. Shelburne Vineyard has this beautiful tasting room just south of Burlington. It's right on Route 7. It gets a ton of traffic every year.
Busy area, yeah.
Busy area, busy tasting room. Events,
Perfect.
live music, weddings, all of that stuff.
Wow.
I mean, we zero traffic here to West Charleston, and even Newport. I mean, Newport is the largest town around. It's 4,400 people, and so there's no traffic to our tasting room. In fact, it's closed 6 months of the year. We just do by appointment.
Yeah.
So very early on, and also led by Ice Cider, which is a niche product that can, the only way to move any volume of that is like on a dessert menu of a big fancy restaurant. And there are, 5 of those in Vermont. So pretty early on, as early as 2009, we were starting to distribute outside of the state. And so we have a very broad, very shallow distribution network. But we've been able to add dry ciders in our cans through that and so forth. And what also went along with that was building e-commerce. Because people would taste the ice cider at a restaurant, they couldn't find it locally, they'd call us up, can I please buy some?
Perfect.
And at Shelburne, they have great Vermont distribution, but not much distribution outside of Vermont.
I see.
And very little e-commerce.
Yeah.
And so the whole story from the beginning, offer their products through our distribution and e-commerce systems, and allow Eden ciders to have a place in the Shelburne Vineyard tasting room.
Yeah.
So that's really been our focus on what the opportunity is to explain the Shelburne Vineyard versus Iapetus.
Yeah.
So Ethan Joseph is the head winemaker there. He's been there 16 years. He started as a kid from UVM. In 2016, he wanted to do his own thing as well, and launch the Iapetus line, which is the natural wine line. So Shelburne Vineyard wine, but that label is more classic wines, and the Iapetus are more spontaneous fermentation and no filtration. Very little sulfur, just a little bit of bottling.
Yeah, totally different than the Shelburne in that way. Yeah.
But I will also say, because he is incredibly meticulous and organized and knows his proverbial shit, they are beautifully made wines. So he and I have had conversations over the years where we've been very passionate about natural and delicious are two different axes. And the trick is to be both. You want to be natural, yes, and you want to be delicious.
Yes, absolutely.
And the wines are beautiful. I have now had the opportunity to go on the road with them. I took them out to North Carolina, Asheville, Raleigh, Durham, and to Seattle. And everywhere I've been, people are like, wow, these are fantastic, including the skin contact orange wine.
Talk about representing Vermont terroir.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, these are things that are grown here, and Ethan and his team do all of the work in the vineyard and all of the work in the winery. So they really follow the whole process from the dirt to the bottle. And the wines show that way. And they're priced typically like high 20s, low 30s. And representatives who thought those prices were unreasonable, they're just like, nobody's going to understand what a wine from Vermont is. It's going to be a hand sell. So there's a lot of market education that we'll need to do. But the adventurous accounts that get this and are into it, all excited about it. And there's this whole movement around anything but vinifera and sustainability, thinking about buying things that are made from things that are grown locally and that are grown locally in ways that make sense for the environment, which means think beyond vinifera.
For listeners on the other side of the world or even in the U.S. right now, just to know, like that area of Vermont has lots of apple orchards and lots of vineyards. So you're talking Lake Champlain, right across is New York State. The terroir there is like perfect. The land is like perfect. The drain, well, I don't know, they have a little bit of trouble maybe with drainage there.
There's some clay over there.
Some clay.
Some places are better drain. And, historically the climate has not been hospitable to grapes.
But hello, climate change.
Happening so damn fast.
A little too fast. But which is making it, we're really seeing some big changes for grapes in that way.
Yeah, it was really exciting until we had the frost on May 18th, a month after we did the deal.
And how deeply did that impact? And what Eleanor's talking about here is there was a late frost. Many apple trees were in bloom.
And grapevines as well.
And grapevines too, a lot of different crops. And so there's been a huge loss this year for 2023. So it was a tough one, even in the vineyard. Is that what? She's nodding her head. Yeah, not a happy thing. You wear multiple hats. And maybe before we go there, I want to get a sense of how the heck do you take care of yourself in this way? And this is kind of looking for tips for any one of us out there in Ciderville. I mean, you just, if you don't know who Eleanor Léger is, okay, so now she's working the president CEO of 3 brands up here in Vermont. All the pieces of the puzzle that go together doing that. There's the Vermont Cider, like a guild association, right? And then there's the American Cider Association, and you're the current president of the American Cider Association. So you're doing a lot. On top of that, just trying to live your life and be with your family and whatnot. How do you take care of yourself?
I was hoping to avoid that part of the conversation.
No, I have it right down here as a question.
I know. That's what I was doing way into grapes. Okay. I don't have children anymore. I have adults. So I can't imagine I would not be doing all the things I was doing if I had small children at home, right? So let's just put that out there. And I'm also a workaholic. I love the work. I love there's just so much variety and so many different challenges, and I'm a problem solver person. And oh my gosh, there are lots of those. So
well, maybe you're not a workaholic. You are passionate about this. It's another way to kind of reword it so that workaholic has a heavy
there is the negative connotation that I don't exercise enough, and I don't. There are aspects in ways that I'm not taking care of myself. They're not things that bother me because I like doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm not doing those things. Right. So, I'm also fortunate. I have a wonderful partner, spouse. So,
who supports these endeavors.
And he's basically a saint. So
well, good. Well, kudos to that. That's a match made in heaven then. Yeah, it's tough, right? It's tough for any kind of business person, whether you have one brand or multiple brands, it still stacks up the same way. And I think it's just kind of a good thing we have to take care of both our physical, but our emotional piece. So it sounds like you got the emotional.
Yeah,
and I want to say,
fine.
as always, Eleanor looks gorgeous. She's one of those people that walks in the room and the whole room just lights up because Eleanor Léger has walked in. Now that you have this kind of like stacked roles here, is there anything you're saying, I'm going to try this for myself? Is there any like hobby that you have or anything like that you do to just get into your own zen thinking? And I think I know a little of the answer, which is driving.
Well, it's true. I do a lot of driving, and that does give me downtime to think.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I give you the secret confession?
Okay.
My team knows this about me. I love spreadsheets.
Oh, okay.
So, like, just being able to shut everything out and like go dive deep
into a spreadsheet,
like figuring like how do I analyze this, and I can do that for hours.
Yeah, and so that's a relaxing piece. Yeah. A comfort zone. Cool. Hey, whatever it is.
Right, exactly.
I think it's good for people to know, and myself included. We're all facing that same piece for ourselves. At the end of the day, what are we doing with our time? Okay. Well, now that we got through that, we'll move on here. I've been seeing in the U.S. cideries opening, but also cideries closing. So how's the state of Vermont right now? What are you seeing in terms of the association just in the state here, and how is it doing?
So first of all, I would say I've not been actively involved in the Vermont Association since I joined the ACA board 7 years ago.
Maybe we shouldn't talk about it.
So I will tell you what we're seeing is new cideries. So, and I have been referring to this as like the pandemic wave. Diane Flint and myself, and we'd like the early into the financial crisis, it was like just before, but like at that point there were like 85 to 100 cideries, right? Then we had the Angry Orchard wave of people getting in, which was more of the modern folks. Right. And now there is a pandemic wave of people who I think are basically, some of them are like taking my CARES program money, quitting my job, doing the thing I've always dreamed about doing,
following my
passion. And at least in Vermont, the folks that are doing that are all wine orchard-based cider folks.
Very cool.
Which is super exciting because it's
Cedar is a good example of wild branch cider. Yeah.
Yep. There's a couple that are associates of La Garagista, Dear to Heaton.
Yeah.
So Disciple Cider, Willa is one of those.
Some of her underlings.
Yeah.
I don't want to say disciple because that sounds a little odd.
But it's the name of the cider is Disciple Cider. So
right, I know.
Right, yep.
Yeah, and just to back up, so Deidre has La Garista, right, which is a winery and also makes cider, and but really emphasis on cider. I'm sorry, wine, and has a number of people who have then branched off from there. That's what you're talking about.
And there's a couple more startups, one in the very southwest corner of the state, just about to launch. It's exciting.
Then let's go back to Eden. We're going to be looking at co-ferments. That will be happening more. And got to get through the end of like 2023 with this harvest and look forward to 2024 for, happy horizons. But what haven't you done? I mean, you've kind of done, like, for folks who don't know, Eleanor is an ice cider maker and has really helped educate the world on ice cider at a level, just north of you is like the supreme land of ice cider, Canada here. And you took the knowledge that you had around ice cider and have really helped other people come online with that. So you have the ice cider, you have gourmet cider that you have here, that sparkling and still, you have it in the cans.
Well, ice cider continues to play a wonderful role for us. It's a small percentage of our total production, but a larger percentage of our sales. And the cans do a lot of volume, but less percentage of sales than they do of the volume.
Interesting.
Sort of the opposite.
Yeah, makes sense.
So the dry ciders are where we have a lot of fun and we have so many fascinating apples to work with. Part of being together with a winery now is to keep telling the story that these are wine-like. And yes, cider is its own thing, but if you're a wine drinker, there's some really good reasons why you should be really excited about cider.
Yeah.
Half the alcohol, half the calories, all the flavor.
Totally.
Great with vegetarian, vegan food. Great with spicy food. Great with food profiles that red and white wine actually don't go very well with. And so, excited to tell that story.
Educating people about what dry cider is.
Yeah.
How do you do that? What is your game plan for that? Is there a secret recipe? Is there another? Is it on spreadsheets?
Oh my
Please,
God!
tell us.
There'd be a magic button.
I know.
So there's some things that I'm trying to influence at the ACA level, the Cider Association level, and then things we're trying to do ourselves. So part of it is search engine optimization around content that is about if you like dry wine. Here's why you might like dry. Put that question into ChatGPT, you get like all the perfect answers.
Right. Well, the robot loves to
It's
talk.
written without any soul, but it's
right.
But there are lots of good reasons that are out there.
Yeah.
So a lot of content that way through the web crawls and social media. There's market visits. I mean, the more that we can
Go to the market, just a face-to-face.
Face-to-face with accounts, with training the representatives of our distributors, so that they know how to talk about it. Making sure our tech sheets have some of those talking points. But then at a cider association level, I mean, there are a few things I would love to see. Who knows if these are really possible? But Michelle's a miracle worker, and she works so hard and gets so much done.
Talking about Michelle McGrath.
Michelle McGrath is the CEO of the American Cider Association. So there are things like we are not on the test, right? If you're studying for WSET or Master Court of Sommeliers, you have to learn about cocktails and sake and beer. In addition to all the wine stuff, you don't have to learn about cider. So
it's just wrong.
We need to get on the test.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
Right? So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is I would love for us to just produce some sample menus. If you're this type of restaurant, this is what your cider section should look like. If you're this type of restaurant, this is what your cider section could look like. How many offerings, what type, what sort of profiles, what sort of sources might you think of, and just have those I'm just consistently amazed. I'm going to date myself now. So the first job I had out of college was working on a project for Guinness. And we would go into like fancy steakhouses in Boston, and they would be all excited about European wines. And they'd have, we've got the coolest wine list. And then they go, oh yeah, we have a beer. We have Heineken. Right. For those plebes who want to drink beer, they're really, they're poo-poo them, whatever. No respect.
It's imported.
Yeah, right. It's important, so it's fancy. It costs a little more. We can charge more for it. We can get it more market.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I feel like that's where cider is. For those plebes who want to drink cider, which really, is not, it's full of sugar and whatever, so it's not good for food. And I was just at a wonderful restaurant this past weekend to celebrate my daughter-in-law's graduation from medical residency.
Ooh, congrats.
Fabulous food. I mean, their specialty is like, they do incredible steaks, so there was like all these Napa cabs, whatever. Can't stand them. Anyway, lots of other red wines, bunch of different beers.
Yeah.
One cider stuck in the beer list.
Oh.
You're just like, oh my gosh. There was still a bunch of their cuisine that would have been perfect for cider.
Yeah. I think that the public's palate is really fatigued. We could have as much info as possible, but I think in the end it has to be realizing that the consumers, we have so many choices that we're overwhelmed.
Yeah. In every market, there's a spectrum, right? Yeah. And you have a large number of people who just want that, and they want it at a price point they can afford. And then you have geeky people who want to just dive deep and understand everything, and they're paying for the entertainment and ego value of that as much as
Yeah.
they are for the actual product.
Right.
It's almost impossible for the same brand to serve both of those extremes. We're definitely focused on the geeky end of it because they can pay the price points that allow us to turn around and pay small scale growers to grow amazing rare fruit. Right? That's what my mission is, to support these growers that, Vermont's not big and wide open. We have topography. You can't have a huge scale orchard here. It's we're all subscale compared to global commodity agriculture.
Sure.
And so my mission is, how do I get enough money from the bottle to turn around and pay them to keep the trees in the ground and taking care of them? And in some cases, they are historic 80, 90-year-old trees of amazing varieties and things that geeks can really geek out about. So that's always been our focus, whether it's for ice cider or for dry cider. And yes, we have cans, but there's still some fun geeky stuff about them, and we put all kinds of information on the label because we know that the people who do care about that stuff will be thrilled to find it on a label because it's not on other people's labels. But we're never going to be that, solution for
everything.
all the people who want something they want to crush in front of the TV at a low price point. We will never be that cider.
Yeah. Although I want to say your cider, drinking it and watching TV is really damn
It's okay.
good.
Yeah. It's not bad.
With a little cheese on the side and a nice movie. Yeah, baby. Okay.
But there are not enough apple trees in Vermont for us to be like the other.
Well, there's the business model right there it's okay to be niche, and this is already a niche market already. So honing in on that and knowing that's your strength.
Yeah.
That's the base point to go with.
Right. So we have fun exposing people to the fact that cider is not one thing, because so many people think that cider is one thing and that it's sweet. And so if we can at least show them, okay, here's something that's super dry. Yikes. People think they want dry, but they really don't want that dry. Right? And then something that's still, the whole concept of a still cider. I mean, I can pour myself a glass and stick it in the fridge and come back tomorrow and it will still be a nice still cider. That's pretty awesome. And then maybe something that's got some, some special kind of fizz to, like, naturally sparkling as opposed to carbonated. And, maybe it's a pet nat or, things that are a little more natural than maybe we typically used to.
Yeah.
So even if it's just 3 or 4, just to get them the idea that, like, cider is not one thing. All these different. Do you say I don't like wine? You may not like red wine. You may not like dry wine. You may not like, but you don't. Some people do say I don't like wine. That's fine too. But it's people
drink
generally
cider.
understand it's not one thing. And neither is beer.
There are so many dimensions of cider. I mean, it's so welcoming as a co-ferment with other fruits or with other palm fruits such as pear to make a pear cider. That, again, consumers, I think, get a little confused. Like, what is cider? Because there's just so many darn offerings.
Yes.
Right. But I kind of feel the same way when I go to the chocolate counter. Right? And I'm just looking at chocolate bars.
Right.
There's a salted chocolate. There's 15 different versions of dark chocolate. What percentage of dark chocolate? So maybe it's not a bad thing because that's where we're all kind of being trained to be in the marketplace now.
Yeah. Given the spectrum of cider that's available, can we get the percentage that cider occupies in the market larger as a whole, across the whole spectrum? What will it take to do that? My theory, I don't know if I base this just on, having studied things or seen things or come across them, but if we are not talking about apples and cool apple shit, it will be hard for the folks who are making modern style cider to keep making the case that their stuff is worth more than things made on a malt or a sugar or a syrup base. It'll never be as cheap as those. So they have to justify a price. And they can, because it does taste better. But the reason it tastes better is because it's apples. So we've got to make apples cool. Like, not just apples that you eat, but just understanding that apples can also make something amazing to drink.
100%.
We have barefoot wine and boxed wine in this country in huge volumes. Barefoot wine being made from concentrate, right? Because people think wine is cool because of the what's happened in the past at the top end of the market.
No doubt. Yep.
So if we can, understand that telling the cool, authentic, geeky stories of high priced stuff at the top end actually really helps the lower end. I think that's a great path forward and really important.
Yeah. And we're seeing that happening.
Yeah.
With pomological exhibitions, you're getting a whole new generations coming on board. The coolness of forage fruit. You look at a roadside apple tree in a different way now.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, there's apple. I'm going to go back. I want to go in a couple of months and look at it. And we have apple camps happening and different little symposiums.
Those are all the right kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then the renaissance that's happening in classic apple regions, in England and in Normandy and Basque Country in Spain, where new producers are coming in and doing really great quality products in markets that have been, sort of declining for a long time.
Yeah.
I think what's important as we do this, though, is not to become wine. Because if you look at the people who drink wine, they're like turning 70 now.
Oh, wait a minute.
No, here's what I mean, which is we made wine too elitist, right? It's all about white European antecedents and not about being accessible and inclusive.
Totally.
And so as long as we are telling those special stories about apples and ciders and the geeky stuff in a way that is inclusive and accessible, then we have an opportunity to grow the market for everybody.
I think the American Cider Association has been doing a good job of that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm so thrilled.
That's really been, I think one of the big showcases of that, besides being a legislative kind of body and doing that, is really bringing in such a diverse population of people all at the same table and telling those stories of not just white people making cider, but all the folks
not just colonial invasion history.
Right. It really changes it up, and stuff like what Hannah's doing at Like Dope cider house out in Youngstown, Ohio, bringing cider to people in a neighborhood who have apple trees in their backyard and realize, you could ferment it, and they're in like a city scene, and they're people of color who really need to hear and have their voices be heard. So right on. I love that. All right, so that brings us to the American Cider Association here, and a little bit of talking about your role there. You've been the president now. This is your last year as president, and then a new person will kind of step forward. You've been president for, is it like?
This is the third year.
Third year, yeah. So is that how that typically goes for the association? Or is it voted every year, a new president?
It's every year.
Every year.
Yeah. So I'm stepping down. I have not certainly been able to, with everything going on here.
Yeah, you got a lot going on. But is that a good model for such a association to have a president coming in every single year for continuity?
Well, I think we tend to reelect people unless they want to move on. Let's be clear: the CEO, Michelle McGrath, gets all the work done. Right? We're a bunch of volunteers on the board that are there to provide some guidance and so forth, and do whatever Michelle tells us to do.
Okay.
But I'd often describe my job as the president is to just make sure Michelle is happy.
Okay. All right. Well, that goes to my other, question, but, what are the tools needed to be the president of the American Cider Association?
I don't know how good a president I've been. I think sort of supporting Michelle and making sure we have a good strategic plan and a vision for what the priorities should be is probably the most important part of the role, but it's done with the board and with the executive committee. And, I think the reason I ran for president was feeling like I really want to make sure that we are representing the interests of all of the cider industry. And we do know that the majority of our members make less than 25,000 gallons a year, which is where I sit. And so we had presidents who had represented other aspects of the industry, and it felt like an important time to step forward and say, I can relate to those of you who are corporations and large scale, because I've been in that world and I understand how those businesses work. But I also have a really good perspective on what small scale cideries, orchard-based or otherwise, care about. And, making sure that we don't forget the things that are important to a good chunk of our members.
Yeah, because it is a pretty big country, the U.S., and there's also a bit of enveloping in Canadian makers too, right?
Yes, although now there's a Canadian Cider Association.
Just kind of recently, initiated up there, and rightly so. I'm wondering for yourself, each step you take along the way, we can be a workaholic, but this is like your life passion. This is what you're doing when you look back on your life, and you could be doing this for the rest of your life, of course. For a large institution, I'm going to call it, it's hard to say that about the American Cider Association, but it is, and as it should be. What would you like to kind of remember of that experience, and what would you like to say, okay, I got this piece done?
The increase in diversity on the board and our outreach to a broad community is something I'm incredibly proud of the association. I don't feel like I had that much to do with it, but I certainly supported it. And I think that differentiates us from a lot of other national associations. And I think it's really important to the future of our industry. And then I guess the other thing is just trying to measure the progress of small-scale wine-style orchard-based cider, which doesn't get captured by the Nielsen statistics. And it was a real pain point for a whole bunch of people in the audience at CiderCon when they would come and say, oh, here's the state of the industry, and it was irrelevant to 50% of the people in the audience. And I know some large-scale producers who would say, well, it's totally relevant because that's the market you're in. It's like, well, not really. I mean, that really is not the business that a lot of these folks are in.
Because they were measuring the quota.
They measured, it's the scanning data from convenience stores and grocery stores and Applebee's and things like that, where none of us ever sell our stuff. Right, chain sales.
And online sales, too, now, which really became a big boon for the cider industry. Yeah.
So I think, we implemented a harvest cider producer survey to say we're not going to be able to measure this on the sales side, but we can measure it from the producers just reporting to us, just get a sense of like, how big is this and stuff. We need to keep doing it so that people will start paying attention and the more we do it, the more people will participate and the better the data we'll get.
Right, so you're hearing that right now, Eleanor. She'll be leaving that position, so it's up to all you makers listening out there to do that. Yeah, it's really key. Right?
It's really key. If reporters want data, they want a piece of data that they can report on. There's no data about what we do unless we produce it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, you got to step up to the plate and participate. I appreciate you, all the work that you've done. You continue to do. And taking the time to talk here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for making the trip all the way up, and right back at you for everything that you do to spread the word of cider.
I imagine that if you've listened this far, you've gotten a bit of value from this podcast, and you might be a little bit like our friend Justin, who just became a patron at the Cider Chat Patreon page, and he also replied to an email request from me asking him a bit about his cider journey. Justin wrote that he currently manages a mead and cider taproom in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Bloom. And there's a brewer/cider maker at the Farm Club in Traverse City, Michigan, who comes by once a month and they catch up chit-chatting about cider and fermenting. And one night they were talking about historic varieties of apples in their counties. And this guy mentioned episode 354 of Cider Chat. And Justin listened and has been listening since. Now, Justin, you didn't mention what the name of that episode was, so I had to look in my data system, and it says episode 354, Preserving Historic Varieties of Apples and Pears. And that was recorded at Maine Apple Camp. Before he started working at Bloom, he only really had hard cider from large manufacturers, and he lists Blake's, Ace, Magners, and Strongbow. Once Justin started working at Bloom, he began to think a lot more about cider, fermenting methods, tasting notes, apple selections, etc. Now he finds himself seeking out small producers to try and takes outings with his wife and son to orchard mills to taste what's around them. And he particularly noted, and I love this, that his son loves to stare at fruit hanging off a tree while he tries to pick it. So it sounds like he's a little guy just being enamored by apples, which is that's just music to my ears. I could totally relate. I asked if he likes a particular style of cider, and he wrote that he's definitely a fan of drier tannic ciders and perries, often where yeast is pitched. Because he says there's something about the consistency that comes with it that he enjoys a lot. And a good friend in town makes a quince cider every year that often has an almost citrusy taste, and it usually blows Justin away. Awesome. Well, what do you think about that Perry pair, Mr. Quince?
I like Justin already.
I'm sure you do, Mr. Quince.
And I'd like to say, Rhea, that his choice of drier, tannic ciders and adding perries in there has made my day.
Excellent. Well, that's what we like to hear, and I know that's not just something that the Talking Palms want to hear, but all the makers out there in Ciderville listening right now, Justin just gave you a golden ticket. I mean, this whole conversation I had earlier with Eleanor was, we were focusing in on how do you educate people about cider? What are you doing there? And if you own a cidery or you have a cider bar or restaurant, you have only so much you could do. You have to run that business, and you could do tastings and go to, different cider fests and stuff. But there's also an opportunity to share cider chat. I mean, look what it's done for Justin. He's not just gleaning off a cider chat for himself. He's now bringing his wife and child out to orchards, to tasting, delving into the apple world. And I think that's exactly what everybody out there in Ciderville wants, right? So maybe this is a good reminder right now to pass it forward. If you're getting value from this podcast and you do have a room where patrons are coming in, maybe you want to start telling your bartenders, let our guests know about Cider Chat. And better yet, put a little sign up at your door or bulletin board. Listen to Cider Chat. It's free. Download it. 8 seasons of Cider Chat with conversations worldwide on orchards and apple tree care and all that. A lot of information there. This is like an aha moment. When I heard that, I should say when I read that, it floored me. Thank you to the brewer cider maker in Traverse City for letting Justin know, not just for this podcast, but for Justin too, who is really interested. And he didn't know until that point that there was this educational resource that he could download for free and get in the cider loop, which is what I do believe that anybody in the trade is really hoping to have, right? Folks who know what's going on. Now, if you're a listener and you're not in the cider trade, well, this might be also a good reminder for you. Next time you're doing a cider tasting with your friends, talk a little bit about Cider Chat. Pick an episode and say, why you like that. Let your friends and family know, because there are many people who have apple trees in their backyard and they want to know how to grow apples well. We have episodes on that. It's there and available for you. And if you are in the trade, this is a great opportunity to put up a sign in your tasting room or at your cidery. There might be folks working in your cidery right now who have no idea about Cider Chat. And it is the longest running cider podcast in the world. 8 seasons. That is like a goose with a golden egg for you if you want to educate your staff, but you can't do it all. Cider Chat is there for you. So put up a sign in your tasting room. Tell your barkeeps to chat it up. Knowledge truly is power in this sense for cider. And all those future Justins, or we should just say people out there in the world who are craving more info, craving to have more connection with the cider world. And all you have to do is pass it forward and let them know about Cider Chat. Coming up on Cider Chat, we're going to be headed to New York Apple Camp with some interviews and recordings. So if you haven't hit that button to subscribe or follow this here podcast yet, this is your friendly reminder to do so. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Yeehaw!